May 28, 1944. Somewhere near Cisterna di Littoria, Italy, a lone Panther tank commander, Oberleutnant Franz Müller, peered through his binoculars at the column of American Sherman tanks moving through the valley below, his lips curling into a confident smile. "Those Ronsons will light up on the first hit," he whispered to his gunner, using the derisive nickname German forces had given to the notoriously flammable American tanks. Little did Müller know that these weren't the same Shermans his crew had faced in North Africa and Sicily. Before we dive into this story, drop a quick hi in the comments and tell me where you're watching from. It really helps support the channel. This is the tale of how a critical engineering change transformed the battlefield survivability of American armor and shattered the psychological advantage German Panzer crews had enjoyed for years. Obergefreiter Stefan Bauer adjusted the gunner's sight of the Panther, his eyes fixed on the lead Sherman now, just 200 meters away. He had destroyed 6 American tanks in the past month alone, earning him the nickname Sherman Hunter among his comrades of the 4th Panzer Division. The Panther's long-barreled 75mm K-42 gun could penetrate a Sherman's armor at ranges exceeding 2,000 meters, while the standard Sherman's 75mm gun struggled to damage a Panther's frontal armor even at point-blank range. "Target identified. Permission to fire, Herr Oberleutnant?" Bauer asked, his finger hovering over the firing mechanism. "Wait until they reach the bend. I want to hit the lead tank first. Block their path," Müller replied calmly. "The rest will be trapped in the valley, like shooting fish in a barrel." Inside the lead Sherman tank, Lieutenant Michael Dawson of the 1st Armored Division felt sweat trickling down his neck despite the cool spring morning. At 26, the former engineering student from Pennsylvania was on his 3rd combat deployment, having survived North Africa and Sicily, something few Sherman commanders could claim. "Hey, Lieutenant, you see something?" asked Sergeant Bill Cooper, Dawson's gunner, noticing his commander's tense posture as he scanned the hillside through his periscope. "Nothing yet," Dawson replied. "But this is perfect Panzer country. Those ridgelines provide cover and firing positions with excellent fields of view." He switched to the radio. "All tanks maintain interval. Scout reports indicated Panthers in this sector. Remember your training. Keep moving. Use terrain for cover when possible." A ruse. What the German tankers didn't know was that these weren't the same M4 Shermans they had faced previously. These were M4A3 Shermans equipped with a crucial modification: wet stowage ammunition storage. The change had been implemented after painful lessons learned in North Africa and Italy, where the Sherman had earned the grim nickname Ronson after a popular cigarette lighter, whose slogan promised it would light up the first time, every time. In standard dry stowage, Sherman's ammunition was stored in sponson bins along the tank's sides, directly above the tracks. When an enemy round penetrated, it frequently ignited the ammunition, causing catastrophic explosions that gave crews mere seconds to escape. Records from 1943 showed that nearly 60 to 75% of hit Shermans would catch fire. Combat records from Tunisia revealed that for every 5 Shermans destroyed, over 15 American tankers lost their lives. Sergeant Frank Martinez, a Sherman loader from Brooklyn, New York, knew the statistics all too well. In his previous tank, he had barely escaped when a German 88mm round penetrated the hull and ignited the ammunition. 3 of his crewmates hadn't made it out. Now, loading shells into the new wet stowage compartments, he felt marginally more confident. "These new ammo racks better work as advertised," Martinez said to no one in particular as he arranged 75mm shells in the floor storage compartments. "Engineer told me the water jackets absorb the shock and prevent secondary explosions," replied Private James Wilson, the tank's bow gunner. "Plus, they moved most of the ammo from the sponsons to the floor, supposed to reduce fires by 75%. Martinez shrugged. I'll believe it when I see it. Dean, the story of wet stowage began in late 1943 when American officers analyzed combat loss reports and crew survival rates. The M4 Sherman had many advantages. It was reliable, mechanically simple, and could be mass-produced in extraordinary numbers. General Motors was producing a new Sherman every 7 hours at its peak. In 1943 alone, American factories produced 21 881 tanks, while Germany managed only 5 966, a production disparity that would only grow as the war continued. However, this industrial triumph had a fatal flaw. When hit, Shermans burned at an alarming rate. British tankers had taken to calling them Tommy Cookers after seeing too many of their comrades burned alive inside American-supplied tanks. Engineering teams at the Detroit Tank Arsenal worked frantically to address this deadly deficiency. Their solution was elegantly simple, yet remarkably effective. They redesigned the ammunition storage system, moving most shells from vulnerable sponson positions to protected bins in the floor of the fighting compartment. Each bin was then surrounded by a jacket filled with a mixture of water and ethylene glycol, antifreeze, hence the term wet stowage. The liquid would absorb heat from a penetrating round, reducing the chance of ammunition detonation. Operational testing at Aberdeen Proving Ground in Maryland showed the modification reduced catastrophic fires by nearly 75%. Production of wet stowage. Shermans began in February 1944, with the first units reaching the Mediterranean theater in April, just weeks before this encounter. Back on the Italian hillside, Oberleutnant Müller gave the command. Fire! The Panther's gun roared, and a 75mm high-velocity round streaked toward Lieutenant Dawson's Sherman. At 800 meters, the German shell struck the Sherman's right front hull at an angle, penetrating the armor with a thunderous clang that reverberated through the American tank. Inside, the impact threw Dawson against the turret wall. His ears rang from the deafening noise as acrid smoke filled the compartment. "Everyone all right?" he shouted, struggling to regain his composure. "I'm hit," cried Wilson from the bow gunner position. Shrapnel had torn into his arm, and blood soaked his sleeve. "Driver, reverse, get us behind that outcropping," Dawson ordered. "Cooper, return fire. Martinez, help Wilson." Sergeant Cooper traversed the turret toward the muzzle flash on the hillside. "I see him! Panther at 2 o'clock, range 800. The Sherman's 75mm gun fired with a sharp crack, but the shell bounced harmlessly off the Panther's sloped frontal armor. In the Panther, Bauer watched with professional satisfaction as his round struck the Sherman. "Hit! Direct penetration!" he called out, expecting to see flames erupting from the American tank any moment. Instead, the Sherman backed rapidly behind a rocky outcrop, its own gun firing ineffectively. "No fire," Müller noted with surprise. "Hit it again when it reappears." Across the valley, the remaining 4 Shermans in Dawson's platoon scattered, using terrain features for cover while trying to maneuver to the Panther's flank. Captain Robert Anderson, commanding the 2nd Sherman, coordinated the response. "Dawson, you hit bad?" Anderson radioed. "1 casualty, but the tank is still operational." Dawson replied, his voice steady despite the chaos. "The round penetrated front right hull, but no fire. I repeat, no ammunition fire." "Understood. We'll try to flank him. Keep him distracted if you can." While Dawson's crew worked to stabilize Wilson and assess damage, the platoon's remaining Shermans executed a textbook flanking maneuver. 2 tanks provided suppressing fire, forcing the Panther to keep its frontal armor pointed toward them, while 2 others used a dry creek bed to approach from the east. For Feldwebel Heinrich Schröder, a veteran Panzer commander with 3 years of Eastern Front experience, this American response was surprisingly competent. Watching from his own Panther positioned 400 meters east of Müller's, he radioed a warning. "Müller, 2 Shermans are using the creek bed to flank your position. Adjust immediately." Müller swore. The Panther's powerful gun and formidable frontal armor were its greatest assets, but its side armor remained vulnerable, especially to close-range shots. He ordered his driver to reposition, but the heavy tank's traverse on the uneven terrain was slow. As Müller's Panther turned, exposing its side momentarily, Sergeant Thomas Reynolds, gunner of the 4th Sherman in the platoon, seized the opportunity. "Target acquired! Panther, right side armor, range 300 meters. "Fire!" ordered his commander, Lieutenant George Harris. The 75mm shell struck the Panther's side armor just below the turret ring, penetrating with a shower of sparks. Inside the German tank, the impact was catastrophic. The shell detonated ammunition stored in the turret basket, triggering a massive explosion that blew the turret completely off the hull. None of Müller's crew survived. Schröder watched in horror as his colleague's tank erupted in flames. What had gone wrong? The American tank should have been destroyed by Müller's first shot. More alarmingly, where were the flames from the Sherman that had been hit? This defied everything German tankers knew about American armor. The tactical situation had deteriorated rapidly. Schröder now faced 5 American tanks, including the one that should have been burning, and his supporting infantry was still 10 minutes away. He decided to withdraw to a better position, ordering his driver to reverse up the hill while maintaining his frontal armor toward the Americans. The retreat didn't go unnoticed. Lieutenant Dawson, his tank damaged but still combat effective, spotted the 2nd Panther's movement. "All tanks, 2nd Panther retreating up the eastern ridge. Cooper, can you get a shot?" Cooper swung the turret, tracking the retreating German tank. "Range 900 meters. He's moving fast and hull down. Low probability shot. Take it anyway. Let's keep his head down." The Sherman fired, missing the Panther but striking close enough to shower the German tank with dirt and rocks. The psychological effect was immediate. Schröder, already rattled by the unexpected loss of Müller's tank, ordered his driver to increase speed, causing the Panther to expose more of its side as it crested the ridge. Captain Anderson's Sherman, now positioned on the eastern flank, had a clear shot. "Gunner, Panther traversing right to left, 700 meters. "On target," replied his gunner. "Fire!" The American shell struck the Panther's engine compartment, penetrating the thinner rear armor. The German tank lurched to a stop as flames erupted from its engine deck. Schröder and his crew bailed out, abandoning their burning vehicle and retreating into the woods. By mid-morning, the skirmish was over. The American platoon had lost no tanks, though Wilson's wound required evacuation. 2 Panthers had been destroyed for no American armor losses, a stunning reversal of the usual exchange ratio in tank-on-tank combat. As American mechanics assessed Dawson's damaged Sherman back at the battalion maintenance area, the evidence of the wet stowage system's success was clear. The German round had penetrated the hull, and fragments had ricocheted through the fighting compartment, but the ammunition, now stored in protected water-jacketed bins in the floor, remained intact. Without the secondary explosion of ammunition, the crew had survived what would have been a fatal hit just months earlier. Major Stephen Williams, the battalion's executive officer, inspected the damaged tank with intense interest. At 34, Williams had been involved in testing the wet stowage modification at Aberdeen before deployment to Italy. "You see that?" he pointed out to Dawson, indicating where shrapnel had struck one of the ammunition bins. "The water jacket absorbed the heat and energy. 6 months ago, your entire crew would be dead." Dawson nodded solemnly. "Wilson's still going to lose part of his arm." Better than his life," Williams replied. "The Germans have been counting on our tanks burning. That psychological edge just disappeared." The significance of this engagement extended far beyond the tactical victory of 5 Shermans over 2 Panthers. It represented a turning point in the psychological battle between American and German armored forces. Throughout 1942 and 1943, German panzer crews had developed a sense of technical superiority, especially over American tanks. The Tiger Y, with its formidable 80-meter gun, could destroy Shermans at ranges beyond 200 meters. The Panther, introduced in 1943, combined excellent firepower with sloped armor that made its effective protection nearly double its actual thickness. Even the older Panzer IVs, upgraded with long-barreled 75-millimeter guns, outmatched the standard Sherman in firepower. German tankers had come to expect that if they hit an American tank, it would burn. This certainty informed their tactics, their confidence, and their willingness to engage, even when outnumbered. A common saying among panzer crews was, 1 Tiger, 5 Shermans, normal odds. What the Germans failed to account for was America's industrial capacity and engineering pragmatism. While German engineers pursued increasingly complex and powerful tank designs, American engineers focused on fixing the Sherman's most lethal flaw. By late 1944, nearly all new production Shermans featured wet stowage ammunition storage. The statistics told the story. In 1943, 60–80% of hit Shermans would catch fire. By mid-1944, that number had dropped to 10–15% for wet stowage models. Crew survival rates increased dramatically. Before wet stowage, a penetrating hit meant almost certain death or severe burns for at least some of the crew. With wet stowage, even penetrated tanks often had complete crew survival. For men like Sergeant Frank Martinez, this engineering change meant everything. 3 weeks after the engagement with Schroeder and Müller's Panthers, Martinez's tank was hit by a German 88mm anti-tank gun near Rome. The round penetrated the lower hull, but failed to ignite the ammunition. All 5 crewmen survived, though Martinez suffered a broken leg from the impact. From his hospital bed in Naples, Martinez dictated a letter to his family in Brooklyn. The new storage worked just like they promised. We got hit hard, but no fire. The Krauts looked shocked when we kept fighting after they hit us. Their faces when we didn't burn, I wish I had a picture. As American forces pushed north through Italy and landed in Normandy, stories like Martinez's spread through both American and German ranks. Oberst Wilhelm Müller, no relation to the fallen Oberleutnant of the 2nd SS Panzer Division, noted in his war diary on July 12, 1944, "American tanks no longer burn as before. Our crews report multiple hits required to secure a kill, and enemy crews now fight with greater confidence, knowing they will likely survive even if their vehicle is hit." This psychological shift was evident in how German tankers described American armor. The mocking nickname Ronson gradually disappeared from their communications. Instead, German reports increasingly referred to the numerical superiority and endless reserves of American tanks, tacit acknowledgement that the qualitative gap was narrowing. For American tankers, the change was equally profound. Veterans who had served in both standard and wet stowage Shermans reported a transformation in crew morale. Lieutenant Colonel James Richardson of the 2nd Armored Division observed, "With the older tanks, crews often froze when engaged, knowing any hit might be fatal. Now they maneuver aggressively, using their numbers and mobility to full advantage. The men talk about their tanks differently, less as rolling coffins and more as fighting vehicles." This shift in perspective was captured in a December 1944 interview with Sergeant William Thorpe, a Sherman commander with 11 months of combat experience. "The Germans still have better guns and armor, but we have more tanks, better reliability, and now we don't burn like we used to. They've lost their ace card. You can see it in how they fight now, more cautious, less confident." The operational impact was significant. American armor tactics evolved from cautious infantry support operations to more aggressive combined arms maneuvers. tank battalions pushed forward with greater confidence, knowing that losses, while still painful, would no longer be catastrophically high. By early 1945, as American forces pushed into Germany itself, the production disparity had become overwhelming. America had produced over 49 Zulu Sherman tanks of all variants, compared to approximately 6 Zulu Panthers and 1 350 Tigers manufactured by Germany. The Sherman's technical improvements, combined with this numerical superiority, had shifted the balance decisively. Oberleutnant Klaus Wagner, a Panther commander captured in the Ruhr pocket in April 1945, told his American interrogators, "We used to say 5 Shermans, 1 Panther. Then it became 10 Shermans, then 15. In the end, it didn't matter how many we destroyed. There were always more, and they stopped burning." The wet stowage modification represented something characteristically American. A pragmatic engineering solution to a specific problem, implemented quickly and at scale. Rather than designing an entirely new tank with better protection, which was happening simultaneously with the T-26 Pershing program, American engineers identified the Sherman's most lethal vulnerability and addressed it directly. The result saved thousands of American lives. Analysis of tank casualties in the European theatre showed that wet stowage Shermans had a crew survival rate nearly 3 times higher than earlier models. For every 100 wet stowage Shermans destroyed, approximately 280-300 crewmen survived, compared to just 100 to 120 survivors from the same number of dry stowage tanks. Lieutenant Dawson continued commanding his Sherman through the Italian campaign and into southern France after Operation Dragoon. His tank was hit twice more, once by an anti-tank gun near Marseille, and later by a Panzer in the Vosges Mountains. Both times, the wet stowage system prevented ammunition fires, and his crew survived. After the war, Dawson returned to engineering school on the GI Bill, eventually joining General Motors as a design engineer. In 1956, he participated in designing the M60 Patton tank, incorporating lessons learned from his combat experience. At a design review meeting, when asked about his insistence on particular ammunition storage features, Dawson simply rolled up his sleeve to show burn scars from North Africa and said, "This is why." Sergeant Cooper became a high school history teacher in Ohio, often telling his students, "History remembers the big dramatic changes, but sometimes it's the small, unsexy fixes that save the most lives." Private Wilson, despite losing his right arm below the elbow, went on to work as a mechanic in Tennessee, specializing in helping other disabled veterans modify cars and tools for one-handed operation. He kept a fragment of the Panther shell that had wounded him mounted on his workshop wall. Frank Martinez recovered from his injuries and returned to Brooklyn, opening a successful restaurant that became a gathering place for tank veterans. A small display case near the entrance held his tanker's helmet and a cutaway model of a wet stowage ammunition bin with a simple plaque, "The reason I'm here to serve you today." On the German side, Heinrich Schröder survived the war, spending 8 months in an American POW camp before returning to Munich. In a 1975 interview for a military history journal, he reflected, "We had better tanks, gun for gun, armor for armor, but the Americans had better systems, production systems, maintenance systems, and eventually survival systems. They solved the burning problem, and that changed everything. It wasn't just that they stopped burning, it was what that did to both sides' thinking." Or, the wet stowage Sherman represented a larger truth about industrial warfare, that incremental improvements implemented at scale can be more decisive than revolutionary designs produced in small numbers. The Panther and Tiger remained technically superior tanks in many respects, but their complexity limited production and reduced reliability. The Sherman, improved through dozens of modifications like wet stowage, gyro stabilizers, and eventually the more powerful 76mm gun proved good enough in sufficient numbers. When American and Soviet forces met at the Elbe River in April 1945, marking the effective end of the Third Reich, the thousands of Shermans that had fought across Europe carried the scars of combat, but also the evidence of engineering evolution. Tanks that had once been death traps had become survivable fighting platforms, allowing American armored formations to maintain combat effectiveness despite taking hits. For tank commanders like Lieutenant Dawson, the war's end brought reflection on how close-run many battles had been. If we'd gone into Normandy with the same Shermans we had in Tunisia, with the same burn rate, I don't know if we could have broken out, he noted in a 1947 interview. Every tank that didn't burn meant 5 more experienced tankers for the next fight. That adds up fast. Indeed, the legacy of the wet stowage Sherman extended well beyond World War II. The principle that crew survivability should be a primary design consideration influenced all subsequent American tank development. The M26 Pershing, M46, M47, M48 Patton series, and eventually the M1 Abrams all incorporated ammunition storage designs specifically engineered to protect crews in case of penetration. Modern tanks like the Abrams use blowout panels that direct ammunition explosions away from the crew compartment, a conceptual descendant of the wet stowage innovation. Israeli Merkava tanks place the engine at the front, partly to protect the crew, another philosophy born from the hard lessons of World War II. For the men who fought in Shermans, the technical details mattered less than the human reality. They were the ones who felt the concussion of a penetrating round, who held their breath waiting for the secondary explosion that might not come, who counted missing friends after each engagement. The wet stowage Sherman didn't win the war. American industrial might, combined with Allied cooperation and individual courage, did that. But for thousands of tankers who survived hits that would have killed them in 1943, this small, unsexy fix made all the difference. As the war in Europe ended, Lieutenant General Jacob Devers, commander of the 6th Army Group, wrote in his after-action report, "The reduction in catastrophic fires in tanks has been one of the most significant technical achievements of this campaign. While less visible than new weapons, this improvement has saved more American lives than perhaps any other single modification to our equipment." The story of wet stowage Shermans is ultimately about more than a technical modification. It's about the psychological impact of survivability on both sides of a conflict. It's about how confidence and fear shape tactical decisions. It's about American pragmatism, confronting German precision engineering. And most importantly, it's about how nameless engineers in Detroit factories saved the lives of young men fighting in steel boxes thousands of miles away. From the hills of Italy to the hedgerows of Normandy to the forests of Germany, American tanks that didn't burn changed the course of countless engagements. The German Panzer crew's confident laughter turned first to confusion, then concern, and finally grim acceptance as their psychological edge literally went up in smoke. And that concludes our story. If you made it this far, please share your thoughts in the comments. What part of this historical account surprised you most? Don't forget to subscribe for more untold stories from World War II. And check out the video on screen for another incredible tale from history. Until next time.